Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and I've got my partner in crime, Jeff Rutt, with us. Say hello to the people, Jeff.
Hello to the people.
And we have a very special guest this week, Kim King, who's the author of When Women Give, The Adventure of a Generous Life. And Kim, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We'll get into, she's got a storied career and all kinds of cool things to talk about. But Jeff, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, well, one of those cool things is Kim was very instrumental in keeping us on the straight and narrow and the creative, all of the above as a board member at Hope International. So thank you for that, Kim, over the years guiding Hope International. But tell us about the early years. What was it like in your household growing up, spiritual formation? Tell us about the early days.
Well, I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, and my dad was a blue-collar worker, and mom worked part-time in administrative type jobs, and we grew up in the church. And mom was kind of the leader on that. She is the one that took us to church and grew up Baptist, and like good Baptists, you're there like 3 or 4 times a week. And so, one of the things that was a blessing about that is my closest friends were not in school, they were at church. Mm-hmm. And I think that was really a very good influence away from some of the other influences, even when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And I had a great pastor when I was a young person who he was just a blessing in the way he taught, and he welcomed both young men and young women to grow in leadership, and I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but and so I was really blessed with that. And my mom and dad were both Christians, and my brother was as well. And my another big influence growing up was my grandmother, my mom's mom. And I can remember I would sleep with her in her big bed when we would visit, and I could see her when I was already in bed. She was sitting in her rocking chair reading her Bible before she came to bed. I have her rocking chair now, so that's special. She gave me my first Bible. It was a Schofield Bible.
Okay, wow.
There are not many of those around,
Yeah. Wow. So really shaped by your grandparents, your parents, and a pastor.
Yeah. And my friends there at church.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Good community. Yeah. Talk about schooling.
Well, when I left high school, I thought my calling was to be a doctor. And so I chose the University of Alabama. They have an affiliated medical school. And so I started there, but that first year did not go well. And I was not disciplined to study. I was playing too much, wasting time. Anyway, it turned out to be one of my greatest failures. And so I also had to recognize that while I could probably learn calculus eventually, it was going to be a challenge for me. And that there were some real doubts I had about whether it was my calling or not. So I went to the other side of campus, the liberal arts side, and became an English major. And I did realize at some point that this was not going to lead to a job. So I needed to think about what I was going to do with it. And I happened to take some courses on the business school. And I liked that, and particularly a business law course. that seemed to come naturally to me. And so that's when I decided, felt led to go to law school. And I can still see the look of shock on my parents' face after all this education coming in and telling, well, we're going to have 3 more years. And they were concerned. They could not put me through college, and they certainly couldn't put me through law school. So their concern was more about, my well-being than financial. So that's how I ended. And I stayed there. I went to law school there, and I happened to work for a very small firm in that town, and the 2-man firm, they did work for the oil and gas industry, and I got interested in the oil and gas industry with that. And so then when I graduated, I applied to different places. I promised Tom Watson, the head partner there, that, I'd go work somewhere and come back. And every time I see him, he says, I'm still waiting. So I left there. I went to work with Exxon. I thought it would be good to learn about the industry and how a successful company worked. And so I went to work in their law group in New Orleans and lived there for 6 years. And then I was transferred to Houston and had different assignments there. And that's where I retired in 2015.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Exxon, obviously I live in Houston also, and Exxon, lots of Exxon employees in Houston and the surrounding areas, and they've got a pretty amazing reputation for their efficiency and also for having a lot of long-term employees. What was that experience like for you? I mean, you were long tenured there.
I was, and I hope it's still the case. They just created an environment where you wanted to stay. You knew people, you could count on people, even in personal situations. You could call someone in another city if you had a relative who needed help. He was an employee, you could call someone. So there was the opportunity to, see different countries and see the business in different countries. And there was a big important issue was always risk with an oil company. It is a risky business operationally. And we have to make investment decisions and calibrate that risk correctly, or approach that correctly, or you'll end up. There's a saying in the oil and gas industry: if you never drill a dry hole, you haven't drilled enough wells.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, inherently risky. And now how did that translate into your law career? I mean, so by definition, you're dealing with the risk and probably trying to paper things to, prevent the downside. But every once in a while, there is downside.
Yeah,
so
there is.
Yeah, how did that kind of develop your thinking?
There's a recognition that when matters get before a court, as the old saying goes, at 20/20 hindsight, it's always perfect.
Right.
Right. And so it's just part of doing business in any kind of business. After the Exxon Valdez accident, and we're all old enough to remember it, like many people, there was a lot of second guessing about decisions that Exxon made, and then when BP had what was it called, Blue Horizon accident, that killed. There's a perfect example. They drilled in an area and decided the risk was acceptable, and I'm not going to criticize them, but Exxon looked at that same opportunity, and said, no, that's just too high for us, and we declined. So every day you're having to think about that operational risk, but there's also other kind of risk. A major risk that developed toward the end of my career was foreign relations and political risk. There were major investments in Russia, that I actually worked on. And of course, we know what happened to them. And then there were major assets in Brazil, and we know what happened to them. And we have or Exxon has major assets in Qatar. And so, that's the kind of risk. Today, they're friends. Tomorrow, they're the country's enemies. But you've got big investments there. You've got employees there. You've got nationals who work for you. So those are also part of the risk. God didn't always put oil and gas where it was convenient. That's for sure.
One of my retired Exxon friends, I used to always ask him, what stand did you just get back from? What?
Yeah.
There's always a stand at the end. So now, did you get to travel internationally with Exxon?
I did some toward the end of my career. I did. At that time, I was heading up in the Law Department, the compliance group, and the compliance group was focused more on laws that applied or had some application to us internationally. So it would be Corrupt Practices Act, it would be antitrust laws, it would be trade laws, it would be anti-boycott laws, things like that we focused on, as opposed to a different group that handled environmental matters, which I never really worked on.
Well, a lot of my oil and gas friends like you that have traveled extensively, especially with a big company like Exxon can't take on too many small projects. It's just too big a company for that to turn the dial. So when they move in someplace, there's always, it seems, a community budget, right? Is that part of maybe what, when you went to see the world, did you see kind of what Exxon was doing and sort of see what they were doing in the communities where they served? How does that maybe correlate with your sort of worldview of what's possible around the world?
I did not see that. I think my worldview was influenced a lot by spending time with the people that worked there. Most of the people that worked there were nationals. They were locals.
Local folks.
Right. And then others, that were there that you would meet, other companies, employees, who are also locals. And so you learn a lot about culture that way. I can say this, within the 31 years I worked with Exxon, I never saw a decision being made that I thought was corrupt or evil or not considering the locals. And it wasn't all about profit. And the reason for that is that Exxon at that time had a long-term perspective. You make a big investment, you're going to be there a long time. And if you break the law or mistreat the locals, you will ultimately pay a price.
Yeah. Thinking long-term, pretty ethically, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where did the giving start coming in for you? What were the influences for you?
Oh, my. That's a story in itself. You both know Lloyd Benson.
Oh, yeah.
The third. And John Montgomery. Okay. John Montgomery goes to my church.
Okay.
And on a particular occasion, he and Lloyd Benson invited a small group of us from my church to lunch. And they wanted us to invite us to the celebration of generosity. It was at Lost Pines at that time. And I didn't know what that was. Never heard of generous giving. And so everyone listened, and they offered to pay the fee if we would go. And I just felt like the Holy Spirit was leading me to go. And it was, I can't even tell you why. I mean, after all, you want to go spend a weekend with people and hear about people who are giving their money away. That doesn't make a lot of sense on strictly a secular level. But I decided to go, and I was the only one who went. Not even John and Lloyd went. So And they didn't pay for it either. They didn't need to do that. So I went, and the whole weekend just blew me away. I mean, it really was people talking about giving half their money away. And I thought, at first I thought, I need to leave here and go back to Houston. These people are crazy. But I stayed, and Chip Ingram was a speaker. And he talked about Matthew, is it 12 or 13? And it's the parable of Pearl of Good Price. I forgot now. The buried treasure and pearl of great price. And it was like the light bulb went off in my head at that moment. And so I was both convicted, but also felt like God was speaking to me. And I was so excited. I made a decision. This is an old story that you've heard many times, but I made a decision to give half of my salary in the next year away. I made that promise to God. Be careful what you promise God. Okay. Anyway, I got back and I started looking, well, how much had I given over the years? And it had just piled up. Salary and stock options and other things that were given me. And I had not given very much at all. That kind of broke my heart that I had not been more attentive to that when I had such an opportunity. And it piled up because, it was in 401ks, and there were opportunities to invest in certain mutual funds, which I did. But it went into that because I didn't have time to shop. I was working all the time. We didn't have Amazon then, that. Remember those days? We didn't have Amazon. If you wanted something, you had to go to a store.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
For all for all the young people listening, these are brick and mortar buildings where you go in anyway.
Yeah. Well, and it was true. I had a colleague come to my apartment and say, you really need to get rid of the furniture from college and buy some furniture. So, I had to start making an effort. It didn't matter to me, but it was a good thing in a way because, I didn't spend much. You probably encourage young people to invest early. Well, I did, not by intention, but I did. So it had really accumulated, and I realized I had not given very much at all. And there were years I didn't even tithe because I didn't pay attention. So that was very convicting. And then I began to give a little bit here and there. And I was introduced to Hope International at an NCF event. NCF Houston at that time would occasionally have ministries come at lunchtime and talk to NCF members about their ministry. And I heard Peter talk.
Okay.
And as you know, his enthusiasm is contagious.
Yes.
But that's not the only reason I gave to Hope. What Hope was doing just made sense. It just made a lot of sense, and as well as sharing the gospel, which was going to be important to me. I didn't want to just skip to someone who's going to be like the Red Cross or something. And so that's how I got interested in Hope International is through that. I don't know when that was, 2000 maybe? Maybe before then. I'd have to look back.
Yeah.
So were you able to execute on that plan? Did you give away half the income the next year?
Well, let me tell you what happened. You know how you just get busy and you forget those things. And, it really was not a good idea for me to make that promise. But one of the groups I got introduced to was a group called Open Arms International. And they rescued orphans in Kenya and raised them and educated them and shared the gospel. A lot of organizations do that. So I didn't know anything about them. And so I decided I would give a small gift, $2,500. And then, but get to know them better and find out more about them. And so I did that. And then about 3 months later, no, it probably wasn't that long, maybe a month, 2 months later, I got a phone call from David Gallagher, who was the CEO and president of this organization. And he said, Kim, I'm calling you all the way from Kenya to thank you for your generous gift. You have no idea how much this means to me. And that was the beginning of other calls and text messages. I had a BlackBerry at that time. That tells you something. Thanking me, and I'm wondering, this does not make sense. This is just $2,500. Not that, that's not a lot to a lot of people, but so I called Melissa at NCF. And I said, Melissa, how much did I give Open Arms International? And she said, well, I don't really remember, but I remember it was a large amount. And so I'll call you back. So she did $250,000.
Okay.
No.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
So God had to trick you into giving the money away, basically.
Yeah, I think so. And I was aghast. And when I shared that with David Gallagher, he said, well, we understand mistakes can happen. We'll give it back to you. And I said, no, let me pray about this right now. I'm, shocked.
Yeah.
And I just felt, and it was during my prayer time that night that I really felt like God kind of winked at me. He said, it's hard. I'll help.
Wow.
So that's how, I got really started getting serious. And Derek Irish became my financial advisor. And I went to more celebration of generosity events. Then I got involved with Women Doing Well right when it was being formed.
Okay.
I know all the founders and the ones that are still there. And so that's kind of been my generosity, journey. Trying to grow each year. And I've learned things and I've not been reluctant to change. One of the things I would say that I think is important for me is if you wait for the point of 100% certainty, it's not going to come.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be risk and you're going to have to step out. And that's what faith is all about.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would share, and I do share, is a question I like to ask ministries now, which is, where do you see God at work such that the talented people of this organization could not have done that without God?
Mm.
There are a lot of good ministries out there doing great things, but I want to be involved with those that I know that God is at work through it. I mean, it's just fun to see what he's up to when he does things that are amazing. And it's kind of sad. There are a number of ministries that have never really thought about it. They praise God for what has happened, and certainly God's in it. But maybe he's not. I don't know if they really know if it's just the talent of the people they have assembled, or it is something that would not happen without God's blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Kim,
anyway.
what do you think some of the things that you've learned from the Women Doing Well group and movement, what are some of the lessons you've taken away from that?
I think that that women that they are empathetic and they can be good givers if they're helped along the way. Many women are not from the business world, and so making financial decisions may not come naturally, or they just need some education and help along the way. And then when I think they understand that they're calling to give as part of everyone, and whatever God's passion that he's put in their heart is the place to give. And so they begin the journey through the Women Doing Well pathway to try to find that out and to begin to give. Women Doing Well has had a number of light bulb experiences by individuals. So that's very encouraging. And the other thing is women like to get together. Not that men don't, okay. But women like to get together, and it provides opportunities for that where women can talk openly about money matters that they don't know. I personally think women may have more fear about giving away money than men. Both can be fearful about it. Fear that they won't have enough. Fear that they won't have enough for their children. Fear that they need to buy certain things to fit in. There's a lot of fear there, but I think that may be true of a lot of men too. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I guess if you're an entrepreneur, you are used to taking some risks, so maybe not so much.
Maybe the folks listening to this walking the dog less than the average, but I think it still creeps in there. It's still something you got to fight. And through that pathway experience, and we'll put a link to Women Doing Well in the show notes, and we've had some other guests talk about it. But were there any revelations for you through that process?
Well, I came before it was developed. Okay, when I started with them, there was a group of founders, and they were experimenting with one-day events. And they came to NCF in Houston and wanted to have something in Houston, a trial. They had 3 trial events. I can't remember now where they were, but one was in Houston, and they worked with NCF to invite women. And that about that time, I guess the book had come out, or they knew I was writing a book, and so they asked me to come be one of the speakers or be on a panel. I can't even remember now. And so I did that, and they were going on to the 3rd city where there was this trial event, and asked me to come. So I did, and I believe that was Fort Lauderdale. And so that's how I got involved. And then they had now had 3 trial events. And so after that 3rd one, they invited me to join them when the founders and others who put this on got together. And the discussion was, where do we go from here? And so, there was the decision was to go on and host some more events, and then talk with Generous Giving and I've forgotten who else, and see if they would help finance the events. Because Women Doing Well, like Generous Giving, did not want to ask for money at the events or afterwards. So they had to find some people that would support it. And there were a few of us in that group that decided to try to help support it as well. And then, so there were more events in different cities. And the story I just told you was one of the things I talked about. I talked about obstacles, fear being one, and then different things for different settings. And then also the importance of having a plan, and how a plan can make a lot of difference to giving, and giving wholeheartedly.
What was the impetus for the book? Did the book come before or after you started speaking with Women Doing Well?
It was sort of I think it was before, but let's see, I retired in 2015. The book came out in 2017. And I'd have to look back at the history to know when I got involved with Women Doing Well. Probably, I don't know. I honestly
around that same time.
Yeah,
maybe.
But they loved the book, and so at their events they give copies of the events, which University appreciates. That's who published the book.
Right.
And I don't keep anything from the book. I just give it away. So I do like to see it sell because of the message, but also so University gets their money back. They're a nonprofit too. Yeah, it was right about that time and they started using the book later when it came out and giving it away. And I appreciate that. And like I said, I know InterVarsity does as well.
Well, you just kind of ticked off a couple of the principles, but what are some of the principles in the book?
In the book, I start out with sort of what we might call the why part, and I spend less time on what Scripture says, which is important. Lots of books written on that. Randy Alcorn was one of the first. But what had struck me was, why would God want us in the middle doing this giving? Why doesn't he just give to the people directly in some way? Mm. And that's when I realized that he wants us to join him in what he's doing in the world, and to enjoy that, and that we are wired for that. And then the other thing I mentioned before was the parable of the buried treasure. That was a light bulb moment. I wanted to share that with others. Then in the book, I talk about the obstacles that you're going to face. And then I talk about some of the practical things, like having a donor advisor fund, or and ideas like giving circles, which are very popular with women. Getting together and doing your giving together, and hearing from a ministry and deciding what to support.
What was it about the buried treasure story that gave you the aha moment?
It's the realization that everything is, the kingdom of God is worth everything I've had or will have. And if I hang on to what I have, then I'm settling for what's of less value. And it wasn't even logical to do that. And so if you believe what Jesus said, then you're going to embrace this and deal with your own obstacles along the way. I'm looking forward to teaching that to the Sunday school class I lead in a few weeks. It's very short, it's very easy. It's in with a bunch of other parables, you can just like blow right through it. But it focuses on the value of the kingdom of God. That's what most people emphasize. But for me, emphasis was on the other. It's worth giving up everything to get it.
Powerful.
How did you figure out the where to give part? You're encouraging people to find what their passions are. What did that discovery process reveal for you?
Oh boy, it was step by steps. I read books. The reason I read the book was because after I had this great revelation, I needed to begin my giving. I found that there were a lot of books written by Christian authors on why. But there were not many, maybe no, Christian writers about how to do it wisely. And there were secular ones, and I read them, and they had some helpful advice. But there were none by Christian authors. And I wanted something that would kind of be specifically addressing women. Not that a lot of it is not applicable to men, but I wanted some example woman out there who was leading the way and had written a book, and who was Christian. It was talking about how this was intertwined in her own life, and there wasn't anything. So I complained to God. You know what happens when you complain to God? He says, "Will you write it?"
Apparently, he adds 2 zeros. That's what I figured out. And I love this. I love pulling this string of connecting the dots. And it's not lost on me that the English major who started out trying to do a pre-med track ended up writing a book. So he even used that major, in a way.
I did. I always loved reading. I always loved writing. Since I was a child, my mom would take my brother and me to the library every Sunday afternoon, and not everyone, but often. And I would just be in heaven among all those books. My brother would be busy sliding down the banister on the staircase. Right. So he became an architect.
Okay.
Perfect. Designing those. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that had always been, a part of me. I just never thought I would be doing it.
Fantastic. Well, so as we wrap up, as you know, Kim, what we always try to do is just think about somebody behind you on the journey, and just a practical tip, maybe for some other woman who, the career's going well, or they've got a heart for generosity, and they're not quite sure where to start, but God's whispering in their ear. Where would you suggest they start? What would just be a practical tip for that person?
I think the first thing that they have to understand is, what do they have? And what's coming in? And then what do you need? Which is not necessarily everything you want. And then begin to set a lifestyle limit. I'll never forget Ron Blue saying, the cheapest car you'll ever own is the one you own right now.
Yeah.
But set, and ask yourself what's really, what's really important. And it's always tempting. I mean, I don't mind telling you, I've been tempted, many times. There's a story in the book, several stories of that. And it's natural to want to keep up with your neighbors and keep up with your friends. And so set that limit now, and then start giving now, however small it is. Start with your tithe and then go from there. If you don't start now, it becomes harder later to set that lifestyle limit, and harder to start giving.
I love that. Just a lifestyle limit, that phrase, or how much is enough, same way, same principle. Those aren't, in our little giving world, those are common parlance, but they're really not for the greater community. So I think that is a great place to start. And then I love your encouragement of just do something. It doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe not paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
Don't get too much in your own head. Just get started and learn some lessons. Jeff,
Right.
I know you've learned some lessons along the way, right?
Yeah. And the title of the book, I don't know if we mentioned it, When Women Give, The Adventure of a Generous Life. And it sounds like it was an adventure. We'll put a link in the show notes, but wow, some powerful principles there, Kim. Thank you for writing the book, and thank you for living it.
Thank you. It's all God. He gets all the glory, all the praise. If you really knew me, you wouldn't believe I could have done this. So it was God.
Well, speaking of that, you mentioned the earlier looking for organizations that are able to do something beyond what the leader is capable of. Mark Batterson, in Chase the Lion, one of his last lines, one of my favorite chapters in that book, says, "Go after a dream that is destined to fail without divine intervention." And it seems like you've lived that principle, and you look for other organizations and teams who also believe in, we serve a powerful and mighty God, and we're looking for places that he's working.
Yeah, that's where it's going to be the most fun.
Yeah, maybe just give us 20 seconds on that word adventure. Why did you put adventure in the title of the book?
I think because you're going to be exposed to new and different things, people and places, needs, businesses, or, and then also because you will see God show up in a way that you just can't believe. How did this happen? And what I didn't share with you is on the other side with the Open Arms International story, is their major giver had just given them notice that they were not going to be able to give because their business had tanked.
Wow.
You were an answer to prayer.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. Well, I don't think
with a little elbow to help.
Right?
from God,
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hey, we'll take all the help we can get.
That's
But
right.
but I just love that you associated the word adventure with giving. I don't think everyone associates those two words together. And so I love that you made that association. Well, thanks so much, Kim, for being with us this week. It's been a real joy.
Yeah, I enjoy talking with you.
Yeah.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank
Kim.
you. And thank you, Jeff, for joining. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Share it with a friend, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.